So we're going to be in the book of Acts in chapter 10 this morning. But before we get to that, I did want to share with you, I don't know if all of you fathers got gifts. I did get a gift this morning, and it was a special gift. See, my family likes to look out for me, and they got me this gift because the doctor told me, because I had gone to the doctor first time in like 5 years, I had gone to the doctor, and he told me, he said, you need to cut back on the coffee. He said, you can't have as many cups of coffee throughout the course of the day. So I said, well, I think that now I'll have the solution to that. So no problem, Doc. I can just stick with 1 cup of coffee and I'm good for the rest of the day there. So hopefully your gift was as good as mine and that y'all will enjoy your day this morning. So we're going to get started with the book of Acts, and we're going to be in chapter 10, and we're going to be beginning in the middle of verse 23. So if you will please stand as we read God's holy, inspired, infallible, and inerrant word from the book of Acts in chapter 10, and beginning in the middle of verse 23. The next day he rose and went away with them, and some of the brothers from Joppa accompanied him. And on the following day they entered Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting them and had called together his relatives and close friends. When Peter entered, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him. But Peter lifted him up, saying, "Stand up, I too am a man." And as he talked with him, he went in and found many persons gathered. And he said to them, "You yourselves know how unlawful it is for a Jew to associate with or to visit anyone of another nation. But God has shown me that I should not call any person common or unclean. So when I was sent for, I came without objection. I asked then why you sent for me. And Cornelius said, 4 days ago, about this hour, I was praying in my house at the 9th hour, and behold, a man stood before me in bright clothing and said, 'Cornelius, your prayers have been heard, and your alms have been remembered before God. Send therefore to Joppa and ask for Simon, who is called Peter. He is lodging at the house of Simon, a tanner by the sea.' So I sent for you at once, and you have been kind enough to come. Now, therefore, we are all here in the presence of God to hear all that you have been commanded by the Lord." Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, I pray that that would be our desire this morning, as Cornelius' desire, to where he gathered his friends, and he gathered his family, and he gathered his neighbors, because he knew that the man that God had told him to send for was going to be coming to bring a message from God. This morning, Father, I pray that we have come to this place expecting to hear a message from you, expecting to hear what it is that you want from us, what it is that you call us to do. Father, I pray that we would have ears to hear, that you would open up our hearts, that the gospel would take root in our lives, and that beautiful, amazing, and wonderful fruit would spring forth from it. Father, I pray that we would be your people, obedient to your word and obedient to what it is that you call us to do. Father, I pray that you would be glorified in and through it all, and we ask all these things in your precious Son's name. Amen. You may be seated. In an article written in Forbes magazine back in the 2014, the author stated that in the 80s and 90s, white-collar workers, they evaluated and they worked on their job as hard as they did because they were concerned about share price. It was at this time that you may have remembered the bumper sticker coming out, "He who dies with the most toys wins." There was a subsequent bumper sticker that came out after that. It was, "He who dies with the most toys still dies." But it's a transition from the 80s and 90s as we come into 2017 or quickly approaching 2017. There's a transition that sort of have taken place because the prevailing generation is not concerned primarily with money. They are concerned with other things. Now, money is still important to them, and they enjoy working and they enjoy earning that money. But more than that, they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to be part of something that is greater than them. At this time of year, high school graduates across the country are packing up cars and getting ready to head on out into the big wide world as they travel to college, and they start investing in their education and learning exactly what it is that they're going to be doing for the rest of their life and sort of investigating those possibilities. But with those college students, before they were ever enrolled into a college, many of them had to fill out an enrollment application. And upon these enrollment applications and upon the documents that colleges send out to these students in order to appeal to the prospective students, there's one tagline that seems to be prevalent, and it's one that which constantly lends itself towards greatness. And the University of Minnesota, their tagline is "Be a part of something great." Ohio State University is "Be part of something great." On a job application for Under Armour, it says "Be part of something special." University of Florida, go Gators, "Be part of something great." NC State University, "Be part of something bigger." North Carolina University, what was that one? Joe told me. Get an education that's okay. Just to think that I'm not just picking on North Carolina. Louisiana State University, LSU, come where you'll never go hungry as long as there's a ditch with some water in it. Some of you will get that later. Now, in all seriousness, people long to be a part of something bigger than themselves. It's why they root for a sports team. It's why they pay so much money in order to attend the Super Bowl. It's why they get so invested into March Madness. It's why people come, they show up to the Grand Canyon because they want to experience the vastness of it. They want to experience the beauty of it. It's why people spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to visit beautiful places and to see beautiful things. It's even why there are people that come to the mountains in Boone, North Carolina, because they want to experience the majesty that is the behold the mountains here where we live. But all of those things are from a spectator perspective. All of those things are from the outside looking in, but whenever it comes to God's kingdom, God doesn't want us to be a spectator. God doesn't want us to be sitting on the sidelines. He actually wants us to be an active participant. He wants us to be on the track. He wants us to be on the field. He wants us to be in the trenches. He wants us carrying out a specific role that fits into His larger plan. So how do we get off the bench and get into the game? How do we get onto the field as far as God's plan goes? Well, how do we become a part of an active member whenever it comes to God's specific plan for our lives, His larger plan? How do we do that? Well, how do we as individuals come together as a church body to be a part of something deeper and wider and bigger and greater than we could ever be on our own? That's the question that I believe that our text this morning lends itself to answering, because it is through Peter's faithful obedience and his interaction with Cornelius that we see that we must do what we must do in order to be part of God's greater plan, in order to be part of something that is greater than ourselves. Now, sort of to recap what took place last week, we had Cornelius, who was in his house praying, and then all of a sudden an angel showed up and told him, listen, you need to send for a man named Peter. He's staying in a man named Simon's house, who is a tanner that's over by the sea. So he sent for those men. Well, at that point in time, Peter was on top of a roof, and he's having a hunger-induced vision in which he sees this giant sheet fall down from heaven, and it's got all of these animals on it. And after seeing that vision 3 different times, God makes it clear to him that the dividing wall separating Jew and Gentile has now been removed as a result of the cross of Jesus Christ. And so Peter all of a sudden snaps out of the dream, and at that point in time, the 3 Gentiles that were coming on behalf of Cornelius are knocking at the front door. Peter comes down and he answers the door. He says, what is it? What do you need? And he said, well, Cornelius sent us. He told us to come for you. And he invites him into the home in which he is staying. Now, this is a big deal because in the Jewish culture, to associate with a Gentile was against the law. It wasn't okay. It would have been the equivalent of a German in Nazi Germany having a Jew come into his home. But not only did he have him come into the home in which he was staying, he also ate with him. He treated them as his guests. Remember, they were preparing a meal, so it wasn't like, you guys sit over here, I'm going to go over here at my fried chicken. No, it was like, come in, and he treated them as his guests. Now, we see that they got up the next morning and they made their way to Caesarea where Cornelius was. Now, look down at verses 25 and 26. When Peter entered, Cornelius met him. Now, let's hold up right there. Let's understand something. Now, if I come over to your house with my family and I knock on your front door, who do you think I expect to answer the door? Do y'all have a butler? Wait, who do you think I expect to answer the door? Right, you. I expect you or your spouse, or maybe if you have an older child, I expect them to answer the door. If you come over to my house, my kids will stand in their windows and they'll scream, somebody's here, somebody's here. I would expect that you or some family member would come and answer the door. That would be expected. But if you were to go to the president's house or the governor's house and you were to knock on their front door, do you think that they would come out and greet you? No, that's not going to happen. That's highly unlikely. Well, Cornelius, he was a Roman centurion. He was over 100 men. He was in charge of them, the military leader. For him to be coming out and meeting Peter would have been a pretty big deal. But he didn't just come out and meet him. It says that he fell down at his feet and worshiped him. Now listen, if I come over to your house and you open the front door and you fall down on your face and you start worshiping me, I'm not going to stop you. In fact, I'm probably just going to look at my wife and kids and see, they got it. But Peter's response was the right one. Peter's response was the right one. Peter could have had the attitude of, yes, you should fall down at your feet and worship me. You should be praising me. I am a part of a chosen nation. I am one of the sons of God. Yes, you should worship me because I am carrying God's message. But Peter's response was the right one. His response was the one where he says, get up. I too am a man. Get up, man. I'm just like you. He grabbed him and he pulled him up. He says, don't worship me. Before Peter could be part of something that was greater than himself, he first had to put on humility. If we hope to be a part of God's greater plan to make an impact by reaching those whom Christ came to save, then we too have to put on humility. Why in the world would anybody that is existing outside of the four walls of this church listen to what it is that we have to say about Jesus if we sound like robotic, arrogant jerks? Why would they? For Peter to reach down and pick up this man, what he is saying to him whenever he makes his statement is, listen, don't think of me as someone that is high and mighty. Don't think of me as someone that's got all of their junk together because, man, I don't. I'm just like you. I'm in desperate need of being worked on. I'm in desperate need of Jesus Christ saving me and transforming me each and every day. I need to be fixed every single day, and that's why I trust in the only one that can fix me, and that's Jesus Christ. Our opportunity for community impact in reaching people with the gospel as individuals and on a corporate level will be so much better received if we put on humility and approach those whom Jesus came to save with an attitude of, I don't have all of my junk together either. Not this sort of false humility, not this fake humility, but a humility that truly grasps that apart from the goodness of God and the grace of God, that there is nothing good in me. When we do that, when we walk alongside of those broken people and we act like that and we say to them, I don't have all of the answers. In fact, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the answers that I do have. When we walk in such a humble way and we say, while I don't have all of the answers, I know the one that does. And I can take you to him. And it's not the pastor, it's not the preacher, it's not the evangelist, it's not the theologian, it's not the apologist. It's none of those people. Ultimately, it's Jesus Christ. You say, he has the answers that you have been searching for. It's in that moment when we approach people in that way that instead of us coming across that we are pressing down on them, Instead, we are picking them up. We are putting our arm around their back. We are lifting their arm across our shoulder, and we were picking them up, saying, listen, I don't have all the answers, but I know the one that does. I know the one who can make things right. But in order to do that, we have to do what Peter had to do initially. Look there in verse 27. And as he talked with him, he went in and found many persons gathered. How great is that? Listen, Cornelius had this vision. Cornelius was a Roman centurion. He was a soldier, and he had this vision, and he had this angel show up and tell him, listen, here's the message that Peter, that this man, he's going to be coming and delivering a message to you. And so Cornelius, what does he do? He said, listen, God's got a message for me. If I'm going to hear it, I want all of my family to hear it too. I want them to be a part of it. I care enough about them that I want them to be a part of what it is that God has to say. How great is that? But Peter continues in verse 28, and he said to them, you yourselves know how unlawful it is for a Jew to associate with or to visit anyone of another nation. But God has shown me that I should not call any person common or unclean. See, for Peter to become part of something greater than himself, he had to set aside his prejudice towards the Gentile nation. He had to set aside the notion, this inclination that says that he was born from a Jewish home, he was raised in a Jewish faith, he was part of the Jewish nation, and because of those things, he was better than or more worthy of the grace that was extended to him. He had to put that aside, and instead, he had to say, no, I am on the same level of each one of them. It's like Paul in Romans chapter 10 and verse 12, where he says that there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the same Lord is Lord of all, bestowing his riches on all who call on him. In order for us to be a part of God's bigger plan, we too have to set aside our prejudice. Now, some in this room are saying, wait a second, I'm not prejudiced. I don't have any prejudice in me. I'm prejudice-free. I'm not a racist. I don't discriminate against people. I'm nothing of the sort. No way, no how, that's not anywhere in me. What about religious prejudice? What about religious discrimination? You say, well, what is that? Well, let me describe an individual that has some religious prejudice inside of them. See, an individual that has religious prejudice inside of them, they say primarily in their heart, but seldom out of their mouth, but always through their actions, that those people out there are unfit to hear the gospel from me. They say, or those people, they're too unclean for me to go to them, for me to go into their house and share the gospel. Those people are too far from God. Or God, you're going to need to send someone else because those people are not worth evangelizing. Or those people are too dirty. Or they have too many bad habits, or they have too many bad morals, or their character is just too bad for me to even get near to them. What in the world would my colleagues think if they saw me with that person? What would they think if they saw me associating with them, entering into a conversation with them? If they happened to see me eating dinner with them, what if they came into the restaurant and they saw me associating with that person that's so far out here? God, I can't do that because I'm afraid of what the other people might think of me. So that's sort of what it looks like as an individual. But what does it look like as a church body? What if a bunch of people that have religious prejudice inside of them come together and they begin meeting, claiming to worship God? What does that look like? What does it look like in a corporate setting? What does it look like for a church body that is unconsciously, and I hope truly unconsciously, embrace this religious prejudice? Well, I believe it looks like this. If the lost need Jesus, they know where we're at. If the lost need Jesus, they know that we're here. They knew that we meet here. We've been here for years and years and years. They know that we come to this place. And so if they need Jesus, they just got to come to the doors. They got to come here. They got to be a part of us. They got to join in with what we're doing. We're not going out there to them. We may find ourselves in a war zone. No, instead, we got to bring them to the church. Let's see if we can get them in here. We have to get the lost in here. But listen, if they come in here, they need to take off that lip ring. They need to take out that tongue ring. They need to take off that eyebrow ring. They need to make sure they take out their earrings. And if they could, wear long sleeve shirts so that you make sure that you cover up those tattoos that are there. Make sure that you trim your hair up before you come in. And if there's any funky dyes in it, don't put that in your hair either, because we don't want to stare at you and be distracted by what it is that the preacher is saying. The religious prejudice that finds itself and manifests itself in a corporate body has an attitude like that towards the lost people. Listen, if they're going to come in here, they better talk like us, they better look like us, they better act like us, they better walk like us. If they're lost, they don't know they're lost. If they're without Christ, they don't know that they're wandering around in the darkness. They have no idea. And their only hope is if someone reaches them with the light. Cornelius shows us clearly that they can be good, and that they can be upright, and that they can take care of the poor, and they can give out alms, and they can throw up prayers to God. But if all of that is done absent from the saving power of Jesus Christ coming in and radically changing their life and His righteousness covering their sinfulness, that individual is lost. And they are in need of the gospel. And the only way for them to get the good news of the gospel is for us as the light to take the light out into the darkness. If we hope to be part of something that is greater than ourselves, then we are going to have to get off of our holy high horses, and we're going to need to get into the mud, into the mire, and say, I understand to a certain degree what it is that you're going through. I have been there. And listen, I am here to help you. I am here to love you. I am here to help you through this dark time in your life. Let me tell you about Jesus, the one that pulled me out of the muck and out of the mire. And some are going to respond with, but I'm broken and I'm worthless and nobody wants me. And we can tell them, you know what, it's okay, because my Jesus, He takes broken things and He makes it whole. And my Jesus, he takes His infinite worth and He wraps it around us to where that which was worthless all of a sudden becomes priceless in His possession. And they may say, listen, all I have are these filthy rags. I have no good deeds. I have nothing good to offer. And say, listen, that's okay. That's all I had too. The only thing that I needed was what Jesus gave me, and it was His robe of righteousness, which would clothe me, which offered me God's forgiveness for my sinfulness, for my filthy rags. And they may say, listen, I don't look like you, I don't talk like you, I don't act like you, I don't have the lifestyle that you have. I can't come in there to this place. I don't look enough like you. And we can say, thank the Lord you don't look like me. Thank the Lord, because I've got my own junk to deal with. And the only person that I want to seek to model my life for, and that I would desire that you would seek for you to model your life after, is Jesus Christ. That you would seek to be conformed to His image. And we seek to take that message out. And we do what Peter did in verse 29 there. What does it say? And so when I was sent for, I came without objection. I asked then why you sent for me. We see that Peter went willingly. He not only went willingly, he went willingly without fully knowing where it was that he was going or why it was that he was going there. What it was that was going to take place there. So if we go willingly, without objection, into the darkness, because we know that there are people out there that are in need of the gospel of Jesus Christ. They're in need of the good news. We take the light into the gospel in order to reach the dark and dying world. We have to go out there. We can't just stay in here. But then when we get out there, what did Peter do whenever he got out there? We see in verse 34, so Peter opened his mouth. Peter opened his mouth, and we proclaim, just as Peter proclaimed when he opened his mouth faithfully, we proclaim that in every nation, anyone who fears Him and does what is right and acceptable to Him, they will be His child. They will be made whole. They will be His. Just fear him and do what's right according to God, and we are acceptable to him. Anyone that does those things. That means that the former meth addict, the one that is aged beyond his years, that means that whenever he fears God, after hearing the gospel message, that means that you pay respect and honor to God. He fears God and he does what is right in God's eyes, to where he repents and he believes in the blood-bought righteousness that Christ sacrificed himself on the cross. Whenever he does that, that he is made acceptable to God. That means that the college student that has drained their life by pouring themselves into parties and into social activities, into intellectual pursuits, that means that them being accepted by God, all it takes for them to do that is to say, God, I fear you, I respect you, I hold you in reverence and honor, and that I want to do what is right and acceptable to you, and he accepts them as his children. This means that the radical Muslim that grew up embracing Islam and embracing the doctrines of the Quran, the one that states that, infidels, they are to be destroyed. That individual, if he comes to a right understanding of who God is and who Christ is, and he begins to fear God and he does what is right and acceptable, that means that he too is accepted by God. But in order for them to hear that message, we must willingly go out of these four walls and open our mouths faithfully with the good news to a lost world. And if we are not willing to do that, then what we are saying by not doing that is those whom Christ came to save are not worth it to me. If we refuse to go out there with the good news of the gospel, what we are saying is those people out there aren't worth it. Christ came for them just in the same way he came for you, and he desires that you would take his message out into the lost and dying world. And we can forget, if we refuse to take the message, we can forget about being part of something that is greater than ourselves. You say, well, I don't feel equipped to do that. Well, let me ask you a question. If you were on your way home and you saw a car that slid into the ditch and all of a sudden you saw the rear end catch on fire, you saw somebody in the driver's seat. Are you a firefighter? Most of you would say no. Are you an EMT? Most of you would say no. Are you a rescue personnel of any kind? First responder? Most of you would probably say no. Would you be equipped by the world's standards to rescue that person? No. But wouldn't you try? Wouldn't you be going down there to see if you could pull them out to save them? For the beggar that was at the gate beautiful, whenever Peter and John were going into the temple, he was healed and he stood on his feet and he started proclaiming what had done, not what Peter had done, but what Christ had done in his life. Do you think that he was adequately prepared in all of the doctrines and theology? No, he was just reporting what it is that he had seen and what it is he had heard. So to use the excuse, well, I'm not really prepared, I don't really feel comfortable with that, is just another way of saying that those people out there don't really matter to me. Those people whom Christ came to save don't really matter to me. And it will give you an indication of the religious prejudice that you have residing in your own heart. When I was a kid, we would go out to the playground. Maybe y'all could help me out with this. There's a big device. It's circular, like 10, 15 feet in diameter. I'm a pastor, so I may be exaggerating a little bit. But it was large, and it was sort of on this axle sort of thing. You could spin it around. Kids vomit, that sort of thing. Merry-go-round, is that what it's called? I didn't know. I expected a merry-go-round to have horses on it and stuff like that. But either way, so it would get to spinning around. But in Florida, it's constantly raining every afternoon. You can pretty much set your watch by it. It's going to rain. And then you got the sun come out and it's going to bake it and all other kind of stuff. It's just a perfect scenario for joints and stuff to get stiff, especially whenever it comes to mechanical things. Well, this device, this merry-go-round, you would start spinning it. And if you were just one, it would be pretty hard to spin, right? I mean, it was like you could hear it creaking as you're trying to break loose the rust that was creeping across and corroding it and trying to hold it up nice and tight. And so you can hear it creaking, just slowly pushing it. But after a little while, maybe another kid would join in, and you would start to, at first, maybe it's a little slow going, but all of a sudden it starts to gain a little bit of momentum. Other kids see it, and, some of them jump on because they're lazy and they don't want to push, and you know what? That's fine. And so you're out there pushing and you're going around, and pretty soon you've gotten to the point to where you're standing on it and one foot is on the ground and it's spinning just radically out of control. And so you have the choice. You can hang on tight or you can jump off. Those are your two options, because you just know you can't stay in the same place that you're at because it'll just sling you off. Sort of a fun child's toy there, but this is exactly what took place with Peter. He began to open up the scriptures to these Gentile people. We see that in verse 37, he makes the comment, as you yourselves know, indicating that they had prior knowledge of all that had taken place. They had heard about Jesus. They had heard about his baptism. They had heard about his life and the miraculous things that took place, and him feeding the 5,000, and him raising people from the dead, and him making the blind to where they could see and the lame to where they could walk. And they had heard about those things, and they had even heard about his crucifixion. They had heard about the sacrifice that he had made on the cross, and they had heard about the trial and how he had died. But then in verse 39, we see that he introduces this conjunction, this word, but. But what you do not know is that God raised him from the dead. That seems to be the implied understanding. While you knew all of these things about his life, you did not know what took place after the fact. And that's why I'm here, in order to tell you about the fact that Jesus Christ has risen from the dead. And as a result of him rising from the dead, God has made him judge of both the living and the dead. And that everyone who believes in him might have new life. See, Peter was pushing that merry-go-round. He's moving it along, and it's just going along bit by bit. And it started all the way up whenever he was healing the lame man, and then it went down as he went into Joppa. And then as Cornelius' men came and got him and pulled him over to Caesarea, he's still pushing on that merry-go-round, and it's moving along. And then all of the sudden, while he is still telling them the good news about Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit shows up and takes it out of his hands. And God was on the move at that point. And Peter got to be part of something that was greater than himself, something that was beyond his own ability. But he was able to do so because he had positioned himself so that he could be a part of what God was doing. And we see it in verse 44. While Peter was still saying these things, the Holy Spirit fell on all who heard the word. That's what I long to see. That's what I long to be a part of. I want to see God move in a mighty way, not just here in this church, but in Boone, North Carolina, and in North Carolina, and across this country. I want to see God move in a mighty way. Don't you want to be a part of something that is beyond your ability, beyond your control, something that is God-sized? For us to be pushing that carousel, us to be pushing that merry-go-round, and then suddenly God shows up and says, here, let me give you a hand, and you better hang on tight, because I'm fixing to do something, and I'm fixing to make something happen that you couldn't do in and of yourself. In order to be a part of God's greater plan, we must willingly go and humbly and lovingly go and share the good news of the gospel with those whom Christ came to save. The book of 2 Corinthians, chapter 20, verse 5. Sorry, that's completely. The book of 2 Corinthians, chapter 5 and verse 20. The Apostle Paul is speaking, and he says to the people, therefore we are ambassadors for Christ. He, speaking of himself and the other apostles, the disciples, those that were proclaiming the word of God. He says, therefore we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. And this is what a pastor is called to do. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. This appeal this desire, this message this morning isn't my words. Isn't me creating some fanciful talk in which to convince you that this is what you should be doing. No, I am speaking on behalf of Christ, proclaiming the word of God. So what you do with the information is ultimately up to you. But beloved, I would ask you, I would beg you, I would plead with you, be reconciled to God. Put on humility. Set aside your religious prejudice. Go willingly as the Lord directs, as God gives you instruction, and open your mouths faithfully. And when we do that as individuals, and when we do that as a corporate body, it's not going to be long until we are just a bystander hanging on tight to a God-sized movement. The question is, are you willing to do what it takes to be part of something greater than yourself? Or are you content being the center of your own universe? Let's go to the Lord in prayer.